Hi, this is Chris Cooper, and a big welcome to the Business Elevation Show on Voice America. I can't believe it's now over 10 years now since we first started recording. But on today's show, I've got a really exciting guest for you today. I'm absolutely delighted to be welcoming Neil McCoy-Ward. We're going to talk about preparing for tomorrow. Now, Neil and I talked maybe 3-4 years ago about him being a guest on the show, and it never quite happened. He was busy, and things kind of happened with his very dynamic and busy entrepreneurial kind of life and career. And I'm having had the opportunity to catch up with him now. I'm astonished with what's happened in those 3 or 4 years, and really excited to hear what he's got to say. And I think if you've been wondering about the last 10 years and about how, thinking about how disruptive of late the world has become. Are you prepared for what might happen both financially and economically over the next 10 years? And that's the kind of question I'm going to be putting to Neil today, because Neil is the group CEO of Forward Thinking Group UK. And what I'm fascinated about is he spent his life literally traveling the globe. He seemed to spend 3 months in the UK, 3 months in America, 6 months when there's not a pandemic, moving around the world, just trying to understand the kind of key problems and issues and that are going on in the world, so he can help his extensive audiences. He's a highly decorated soldier. He's an experienced CEO, investor, financial forecaster, housing market expert, and he's a best-selling author. He's particularly known for his controversial sometimes, but also his expertise in the areas of finance, investment, and the housing markets. He's got a huge social following of over 285,000 people who are looking at his research and his recommendations and his forecasts, which have often beaten the biggest and largest and most well-known research companies. Fascinating life, fascinating guest. Big welcome to Neil McCoy-Ward.
Thanks, Chris. I hope I can live up to that introduction there.
Well, you're very welcome. I've been quite blown away watching some of your videos, which you sort of pointed me in the direction. There's a whole new world of Neil McCoy-Ward that I had passed me by, but it clearly hasn't passed a lot of people by. So full respect for what you're doing and the platform you've created. And I know you work closely with your wife as well on some of these things, but yeah, it's really seriously impressive. So before we go into that though, I want to find out about what makes you tick. So what was life like growing up for you, Neil? And I know you joined the military, but why? And look at your path now,
Yeah, well, so I grew up in Coventry, which is a city right in the center of England in the United Kingdom. And it was known as more of an industrial city. Most people worked in the car industry. So there was, Ford and Peugeot and, all these big plants, Jaguar, Land Rover, there's all the sort of big plants there. So I grew up there. My father worked at Jaguar Land Rover as well, or Jaguar at the time. And I would say it was a pretty tough upbringing, as most big inner cities of the day. It was a hard upbringing, which, looking back on it now, I didn't like it at the time. And I remember that I was upset about certain things, as you are as a kid. But, now looking back on it, I feel like it was a great upbringing that helped me to become the person I am today, actually. So let me give you an example. On the playground, all the kids had the latest Nike trainers and Adidas and all that. I had high techs, right? The high tech kind of trainers and not all the latest brands and fashions and stuff like that. So I had to actually think outside the box and say, how can I make some money to go and do that sort of stuff? Because my parents were very strict on it. They weren't going to give me pocket money and stuff like that. I had to go and earn and work for everything. So that really helped me to get started in entrepreneurship. But then I kind of parked it because I didn't do well at school. I didn't get the only things I did well at was business studies and graphic design and PE, obviously, but business studies, graphic design. Well, there wasn't really much I could do with that because I didn't have good grades in math and English and science and all of this. So one thing I wanted to do was join the Royal Marines. And they've sort of, laughed at me because of how small I was at sort of 15 years old, wanting to go and do that. And they said, absolutely no way, you'll never get in. So I went to the gym and I ran and exercised and bulked up and all that. They still said no. So luckily the British Army said, yeah, we'll have you. And I was actually the youngest soldier from my intake. I was 17 years old, and the average age was, they were in their sort of mid-20s, I guess, most of the guys. So that was a real baptism of fire, going from a tough upbringing, but then going into the military at 17 was even tougher. So I guess that's the sort of, without us spending 2 hours talking about my life around that, that was it. And I went to the military at 17.
Yeah, I'm reflecting now. I was from Scunthorpe, a steel town. I'm not sure actually fashion even got that far north actually. So I didn't have that problem. But we had very close friends that we'd met on a holiday who lived in Coventry, and he and his friends that we got to know, they all worked in for Jaguar Land Rover and people like that as well. So we probably had quite a similar upbringing in some ways. I get what you say. But you achieved significantly, didn't you, in the military? And you were attached to the SAS in the end.
For a few years.
That can't have been easy. I mean, just what was life like, and what was the most scariest moment for you in all of that?
Gosh, I could tell you 100 scary moments being attached to the SAS guys. That was difficult as well. I remember when I first went over there for an interview, because I said from day one, that's what I wanted to join. And there's obviously a 6-month selection process. That's not the route that I went in on. I trained for that day and night. I think I told you earlier in the week when we had a quick call that I was up at 4 a.m. every Saturday, every Sunday morning. I was up in the Brecon Beacons training with 60 pounds of weight on my back. Every weekend without fail, rain or shine or deep snow once, which is a crazy story where I almost had to be rescued off a mountain. Don't do what I did, but that's dedication for you. But it was really, really tough. It was probably one of the hardest jobs you can ever get into in the world, because if you think there's only a few SAS squadrons within a regiment, and actually going into that was, I can't even tell you how difficult it was to get that job, because there's only really 2 or 3 guys that get into the squadron as an attached soldier. You've really got to be like the best out of what you do to do that, because you wouldn't get the respect. They would just choose. I saw guys that came in and they were just kicked out within a week, because you've got to have that level of respect and humility, and you've got to be able to perform as well, because wherever the squadron goes, you have to go. It's not like, obviously I can't say certain places we went to, but it's not, if you've got to jump out of a plane or you're doing some sort of training or something like that, you can't just be like, oh yeah, I'll just drive in and, I'll see you later on. No, you have to do everything that the squadron does in some regards. Scariest thing, I could tell you a lot of things, but without going into sort of mission type of things, I remember one of the hardest training exercises that I had to do, and that was a helicopter dunker training. I don't know if you've ever heard of this before.
Oh my word, yes, I have seen. I saw a TV program on it. It scared the life out of me.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So what happened one day was it was sprung on me. I didn't know that we were going to do this. I thought it was parachute training or something like that. But no, it was an Olympic-sized swimming pool. So I didn't even have my shorts. I don't know what I was thinking this day, but it's Olympic-sized swimming pool. And there's a shell of a helicopter above it. And you're like, a lot of aircrew will be listening to this saying, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. And you're in your full gear, you get strapped in, and then they drop this helicopter into the pool, and as it goes to the bottom of the pool, and then you have to very methodically and politely wait your turn, unclip and climb out swim out the window and all that. That was the worst for me, because I was always one of the last out. And there was a couple of times, I'm like drowning and have to be fished out. So that was probably the worst sort of training thing I had to do. Obviously, apart from, the Brecon Beacons over that with, 60 to 70 pounds, some days of weight on your back. But, these are the things you do, if you want to achieve in life, I suppose.
Yeah. And I know you had all sorts of commendations in it's like Afghanistan and Iraq. And so you've really, we won't go into that. I think as certainly Afghanistan at the moment, we could probably talk about that for the rest of the show. But
yeah,
I'm kind of I know you kind of developed your career through in the military for a few more years, and you were doing very well in there. But then you decided to go out into civilian life. Did they open their arms and welcome you and take on board all the experience and wisdom that you'd acquired?
No, I was really shocked by this, Chris. Actually, I thought because of my CV or my resume that I would walk out and I would be headhunted left, right, and center. I thought every military contracting company, private security, bodyguards, weapons manufacturers, I thought everyone would be after me. No one. I had to fight tooth and nail to get into, just to get job interviews like Lockheed Martin and, some weapons companies. I did go and work for a private security company for a short while who does all the, the guarding on the ships and, trying to fight off pirates and all that sort of stuff. I was with that company for a short while. But yeah, it was difficult. It was so difficult. And in the end, I pretty much ran out of money, actually. So I'd gone from being very successful, the top of my career, living in London eventually, because I got my last posting in central London. There was a new garrison being set up, basically, which looked after the guards for Buckingham Palace. So I went and helped with that. I was in the headquarters there for my last year. So I was in London, ran out of money very quickly, because you don't realize actually how expensive London is when you're paying for everything, when the army's not paying for it for you, your apartment and food and transport and entertainment and things like that. So it was really tough. I'd gone from the top of my game right to the bottom, and I had to, and that's how I ended up back in Coventry actually for a while, because I just thought, right, I'm in dire straits here. People always laugh. They say, why do you tell people you went from really successful to, you were almost sleeping on a couch type thing? And it's because I don't care. I'd rather tell the truth to people of what life is really like than to, have everyone assume and think that life is just easy and people become successful overnight and all this. There's no such thing. It is, you fail forward in life.
Yeah. And I'm glad you told that story, because you've got a quite exciting life now. But you had that period like sleeping on couches, and when I first met you, you got all these entrepreneurial businesses. So what sparked you to become an entrepreneur, and how would you describe yourself today? I mean, I'm guessing you're someone who likes quite a bit of variety, because you've got a number of different interests in your portfolio, but you seem to become particularly known around your business kind of forecasts and predictions and wisdom around what's going on globally. How did that happen? How would you describe yourself today?
Yeah, that was really by accident. So last year, I was in my main role as a CEO role, and all the lockdowns happened. And I tell you, and all these CEOs that say, oh yeah, I knew exactly what to do and how to handle it, and they're talking nonsense. I don't know why they keep saying this. I keep seeing interviews with them, and it's all ego, really. I'll tell you what happened. When that happened last year to me, the first thing that I said was, oh my goodness, calling meetings, speaking to directors and managers and staff. I said, look, I haven't got a clue what's going to happen here. I don't know what's going to happen. But we're just going to have to work together, work as a team, and we're just going to have to figure this out and do whatever we need to do. Now, the difference is I put staff first, and I always have done. I don't put profits first. And this is why you're seeing a lot of problems with businesses right now, and all the collapses and the worker shortages and supply chain breakdowns, because they've been putting profitability first before their employees. See, I do the opposite. And that's why we haven't had major difficulties, because the employees have pulled together and they've taken care of, we figured it out together. Yeah, what was your question again? Because
Yes,
sometimes I
I'm
like to
trying. I'm
laugh.
trying to get. Yeah, no, I'm trying to get a little bit of a shape of. I kind of get a bit of a shape of what you how you would classify yourself right now, and what do
Mm,
you actually? What are
okay.
your businesses?
Yeah. So those businesses are mainly in the real estate housing market industry. So, we used to do development work. We don't do development work anymore. We did home improvements. We don't do that anymore. So what we specialize now are some quite unique types of property investment from, and this came about again purely by, I always take opportunities when they're presented to me. So an opportunity purely by chance came up in Coventry. And what happened was there's something called an empty homes officer at the council. And this gentleman said, we've got all these people that, we've got all these homes that are empty and they're derelict and they need improvement, but the landlords haven't got the money. So they're just sat there. I mean, thousands of these houses just empty.
Mm.
So the same day I was speaking to someone from an association called Whitefriars, and that's basically the housing association where they help people like ex-soldiers, people who are homeless to get into housing. And I went, hold on, wait a second. All these empty houses, all these people that need housing. So straight away I said, I wonder if there's any grants for this. So I looked
Mm.
into it and I found out there were grants. So I went back to the empty homes officer, went to the council, etc. And we started renovating all these houses and putting all these people that were homeless into the houses. And we then got a cut in the middle. So that was the first business.
Yeah. Oh, great. Well, we're going to get a commercial break now, but after the break, what I want to do is find out, a little bit about your podcast, but also talk about some of the things, some of the themes that are coming through that. So there's things like you talk about the Great Reset, and also you share lots of wisdom around property and around investment. But also, what I noticed too is you're fascinated in kind of the climate and the water problems, and so it seems like you're kind of touring the planet looking for the things that are important and are going to shape our lives going forward. So I'd like to sort of get into a few of those after the break. Hi, this is Chris Cooper. I'm with Neil McCoy-Ward. We're talking about preparing ourselves for tomorrow, but we've actually been looking at yesterday, really. We're looking at Neil's background and his history, and there's so much more in there that I'd love to explore. However, I'd like to start thinking about tomorrow if we can. And one of the things you've become very, very famous for globally has been your YouTube channel. As I say, I've been watching some of your videos. I'm really quite fascinated by them, and I think I might become a regular. Tell us a little bit about about this YouTube channel, and also the kind of topics and subjects, and why you're doing it.
Yeah, well, the YouTube, actually, this carries on from your last question, Chris, which was how I got into it. So purely by accident last year, so this was in March time, I didn't have anything to do. I mean, I'm not joking. Once all the lockdown started, I had nothing to do really. Maybe a 1 day worth of work each week. So I thought I'm going to just start this YouTube channel, and I started the channel, and I started with some, general topics which people weren't really interested in, and then I hit on a couple of topics that people were interested in, was housing market and investing and stuff. So I started leading into that, and it just exploded up from there. I think it was probably one of the fastest growing YouTube channels. It went from 0 to 385,000 subscribers in the space of a year or something. It was crazy. And predominantly what I focus on is economics, macroeconomics, the global economy, GDP, interest rates, etc. Talk about central banking, investing, housing market, finance, precious metals, investment, stock market. There's loads really I talk about. And then more recently, so what I do, I let my subscribers dictate the way the channel goes, which is quite an unusual approach, but I find it works quite well. So I let them tell me what they want more of. So recently, they've been asking a lot about climate, water, food shortages, supply chain breakdowns, etc. So the last couple of months, I've been focusing heavily on that to just explain all this, break it down so people understand what is actually going on.
Yeah. How have you become an expert on all of these different areas? I know you've traveled a lot around the world, but how have you done it?
Well, Firstly, the travel has really helped. So as well as reading thousands of books over the last 15 years or so, 20 years or so, just reading thousands of books. I read 2 to 3 hours every day. So that's the most important thing. Obviously, most people can't do that because they have 9 to 5 jobs, etc. But I'm able to manage my time really well, and actually, I'm able to read a lot. So that helps, being able to read. And what I do is, first and foremost, I find out who the top experts are in the world, and I just read all of their material. And then I start finding out, there's these 2, 3, 4, 5 other people who are top experts in the world on this topic. I read all their material. And then so people call me an expert in different topics. I don't really say that about myself.
Yeah.
I consider it more a case of, I'm very good at getting through all the noise and getting to the nitty gritty and find out exactly what's going on, as opposed to what the media or what the government might say is going on. I'll sort of break through all the white noise and say, okay, this is specifically what's happening here.
And what are you seeing as what are the key issues, trends that are on your mind at the moment when it comes to the future, that people in business, people who are listening to this show at the moment, that they might need to have some understanding of?
Well, not to worry everyone too much, but I'm not optimistic for the future at all. And I've been saying this since right at the start of the pandemic, that I just do not see it the way other people see it. A lot of other business owners see it. And you see, the problem is everyone thinks that we're in this booming economy because, we're just in this booming economy because the government and the Federal Reserve and everyone else says so. That's actually not true. That's what you've seen on the face of it. But what's actually happening? Why is the stock market exploding? Why is the housing market exploding? Equities and all these other things. You've got to ask the question, where's all this money coming from?
Yeah.
This is what no one ever asks. Yeah. It doesn't just come out of, thin air, although that is actually what happens. So this is the lowdown on it. Central banks create currency out of thin air. And that is fact. A lot of people don't like it when I say that, but that is a fact. They create it out of thin air. They then have these accounts, and commercial banks have accounts with the Federal Reserve. And the Federal Reserve will then put money, so they're swaps. They put money into these accounts, and this creates liquidity. So the key here is liquidity. So you have liquidity, and the more liquidity it's created, and this is what's known as QE. You'll have probably heard this term before, quantitative easing.
Yeah.
So let's say the government creates all these bonds, for example. Well, who buys them? It's the Federal Reserve. So they buy them. Where does the money come from? They create it. So then so it's very complex, but I'm trying to make it simple. So you have all this liquidity, new liquidity. And I always describe it as a jug of water. So let's say you've got a jug of water and that jug of water is full, but then you put it under a tap and you fill it more and more and more. That jug of water doesn't stay at the same level. The water spills out. And that's the same with the economy. So the reason the economy is expanding and all these assets are expanding is because there's more currency. Now listen to what I'm saying there, more currency. That doesn't mean more money. Money and currency are completely different things. So money would be like gold or silver. That is real money. Currency is just paper or digital numbers on a screen. So this is actually what's happening. Now, when I actually back last springtime, I said, this is going to end very badly, because what's going to happen is once you do a round of QE, the inflation always comes 12 to 18 months later, and it will be in almost direct correlation with the amount of QE produced. So what we're now seeing is all this inflation. Now, this is a double hit in inflation, and I don't think the central banks expected this. Why? Because they were only looking for QE inflation when they did their forecast. What they weren't seeing is the supply chain breakdowns and what would happen with employment. So people getting stimulus, i.e. not working, human nature, path of least resistance, etc. So all of this combined has created this perfect storm for inflation. And they're saying, oh yeah, transitory, few months. No, that's not true. So everyone that's investing based on this transitory inflation theory for a few months is going to be caught out very badly, because the inflation, you've still got easily 18 months worth of QE inflation coming through. And this is, look what's happening in the US right now. They're actually talking about another round of some sort of big package, 3.5 trillion, whatever it was, as of today, they want to put in. You cannot keep creating all this currency without it creating inflation. And that's what the world is now seeing, this rapid inflation.
So are you saying then, with all of this extra liquidity, the more stable systems we have at the moment may break down with stock market crashes and interest rates going up? And is this what you're predicting? What will they?
So my forecast 3 or 4 months ago was that I believed the Federal Reserve and other central banks would have to taper December this year or January. And I always said that I don't think there'll be major interest rate rises for a long time. If they do 10 basis points, which is basically 0.1%, maybe 1 or 2 of those next year. I think I might have said at one point, maybe 25 basis points next year. But looking at that now, I just can't see how that would be possible. So even with those interest rate rises next year, which I think could happen, I really think it's 50-50. If they did do one, it's going to be 10 basis points at most. I think it's probably going to be 2023 before they even think about that. But tapering, actually, Jerome Powell's now been talking about that and saying that they're probably going to start in December or January this year. Now, how did I know that? Or how did I suspect that? It's really simple. I do things that people just don't do. I go back and look at what they did in the last recession, the recession before. I look at the monetary tools they had, and then I overlap that with what's going on right now and just try and, it's like a jigsaw puzzle. You've got to try and, or tracing paper, you've got to try and overlap it and see what they might do. Now, I thought they would do, because they're doing 120 billion of QE a month, which is obviously causing inflation, as we mentioned. Now, what I thought they would do is they would bring it down by 10 billion a month, so that, let's say you start in January 2022, by the end of the year, it would be finished. Now, what they've said has really surprised me. They've said they want to do 20 billion a month and end it by the summer. Well, this is a terrible idea. And look what happened just last week with the job numbers that came out. The job numbers, I think it was 720,000, I think was the target, and they got 235,000. Everyone's shocked. Oh my goodness, they're in uproar. I wasn't shocked at all. I'm surprised they got that many because of everything that's going on. Now, are they really going to taper now? This is the question. I'm not sure. I'm 50-50, because if it were me, would I taper? Well, I'm now in between a rock and a hard place. If I don't taper, I'm going to cause a market crash. I don't want to give forecasts and timelines on that. But they're going to cause a market crash. Now, they can't raise interest rates, because if they raise interest rates, they're going to cause a market crash. That is fact. Yeah. Every time stock market will crash, the housing market will reduce as well. And every 1%, let's say they increase mortgage interest rates, they're going to bring the housing market down by 10%. So they can't even do, let's say they want to do 2 or 3% rise, they're going to bring the housing market down by 20-30%.
Yeah.
So it is a complex situation. There is no perfect solution to this. It's going to end badly. It has to end badly. You can't create things out of thin air and expect it not to have an impact. It's like an organism, the economy and the global economy. Now, the biggest risk, I think, is that if something bad happens in the US and there's a stock market crash, housing market crash, in the future, once they start raising rates and they finish the taper, that is going to be global this time. It's going to be 2008 on steroids. That's the biggest concern right now.
So what would you be doing if you, if people are maybe listening to this and saying it's obviously a gloomy prediction of what the world may be like? What would you say to people who are thinking about buying property right now, or selling property even?
Yeah. Now, because you'll have listeners from all around the world, I can't give a one size fits all, because every property is different. Every town, every city, even a road within a city is different.
Yes.
You can have one road here, the next road will be half the value. You know, you've seen this in places. Kensington in London's a great example of that, you know, although I doubt many people listening will live there. You know, 10 million pound houses and stuff. But in terms of the housing market, really what you've got to look at is, if you buy now, let's say that prices continue going up another 20, 30%. And that's possible. It is possible in some countries, because if they don't reduce liquidity and they keep rates low, you're going to see asset prices expanding. This is just normally what happens. But yeah, let's just say that it goes up 20, 30%. But then however many years later, you see a housing market crash. And this one's really, really deep. So let's say like Florida in the last one went 50% or more. Well, let's say it's that deep, and it could be nationwide, right? So let's say there's this massive crash. And I'm not saying this is going to happen. I'm just giving it as a hypothetical. Well, you might have gone up 20, 30%, but you've now dropped 50%. So you could be 20% undervalued now.
Yeah.
And you're sat on that house for 10 years. That's how long it's probably going to take to recover, 10 years, and you're 20%. Here's the other problem with it. And this doesn't apply to America, it applies to everywhere else, where they only have 5-year fixed rate mortgages. Now, in the US, you've got 20, 30 years. You can just fix and say, I don't really care what the value of my house is, because it doesn't really matter. I can just stick with the mortgage, and that's that. But if you're in the UK or Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Europe, and your house is 20% underwater, and you want to then refinance, you can't, because you haven't got the equity in the house to do it. You're going to go onto a variable rate mortgage, which is going to be a lot higher. And you're probably going to be paying way more than, you get what I'm saying here? You're not going to be able to afford that mortgage. What if you lose your job? What if two of you got the mortgage, but now you've separated, or one partner has lost their job? There's all these sort of things you've got to bear in mind. Now, personally, I'm not buying property right now, and I'm a property guy. But if I were, if I were thinking about buying property, I would just be very careful. I would consider everything that I've said very carefully, and then make a decision as to what's right for you. If you're in America and you can get a 30-year fixed rate, and you don't care about the values, then it doesn't really matter. If you're investing for cash flow, it doesn't really matter. But if you're, buying it as a house, or you're buying it as a home, then you've really got to think about these sort of things. And I know that probably wasn't a very fluid answer to the question, because I'm trying to think of 1,000 people in my mind at the same time.
Yeah, no, I can really, really get that. But I suppose the point that you're making is that if you do find yourself in a situation where you haven't got that equity in the future, you could be paying a lot of money for something that's going to take a long time to catch up again.
I mean, just look at what happened in 2008. That's exactly what happened. So many people were caught out by it, and the rates went up by a lot. So some people that were paying 3 or 4% were up to 8 or 9%.
Yeah,
that's a big difference. Just think, the average house now at say 250, 300,000. If you're paying an additional 4% on every 100,000, that's 4,000. Let's say you got a house at 300,000. That's 12,000. That's an additional $1,000 or pounds or euros on top of your mortgage right now.
Yeah,
people don't think about that.
I do remember it was before I was relatively young at the time, but younger. But I think the beginning of the 90s or late 80s even. The interest rates in the UK went up phenomenally, didn't they? People were 15, 16%, something like that.
Yeah. Well, you want to look at America, and in Paul Volcker's day, who was head of the Federal Reserve, boom, 20%. It was, people would just, but here's the thing, Chris, that would solve all the problems we have right now. If the Fed just put rates up to 25% tomorrow, everything would collapse. You'd see a massive, what's called a deleveraging. You never hear it, people talk about it, but you'd see a massive deleveraging. You would see everything collapse by 80 to 90% if they did that. just on average. But what it would do is it would just clean out all the junk. It would just clean everything out, all the bad businesses, all the zombie companies, all the share buybacks and everything else that's going on. It would just clean everything out. And you would see who is really profitable and who's just living on fake liquidity and borrowing money at 1%, etc.
Yeah, interesting. So what about people who own property at the moment and considering whether to sell it or whether to keep it? Property going.
They're doing great. Everyone that's owning property at the moment is doing great. So my wife and I have a house in the UK, and that's gone up massively in the last year. And then we have a house in the Midwest as well, USA. Again, that is it's exploding up in value like you wouldn't believe. Now, what we're personally looking to do is to buy a farm or a ranch in the US Midwest. That's what we're looking more towards, which ties back into your earlier question, actually, because I am concerned about the future. And I do think that, I'd rather be prepared than not. It just baffles me how a lot of people that I talk to on a day-to-day basis think everything's a conspiracy theory. And then it doesn't matter. There's people from a year ago say, oh, conspiracy theories. And then you say to them, oh, remember you said that was a conspiracy theory, like central bank digital currencies. I was one of the first people to be talking about that. Everyone said, oh, this guy's a conspiracy theorist spreading all these malicious rumors. A month later, BBC announces central bank digital currencies. Yep. And now they're global. All the central banks are going to be doing them. Yep. Welcome to my life where everything you say is a conspiracy. And then a month later, it comes out in the news. And then the people that said it's conspiracy saying you're making it up, they disappear, or they say, oh, well, a broken clock and all that.
There's also a lot, I noticed there's a lot in, I got a little bit interested in cryptocurrency through one of my previous guests. A number of people mentioned it. So I got interested. I wanted to find out more about it, more about blockchain. So I got a little involved in that. And what I've noticed through learning about that, it was a learning exercise really, was there was so much smoke and mirrors of people saying one thing but doing another as well.
Yeah, interesting. Like, give me an example of that.
Well, I'm thinking about some of the people in the crypto, who maybe are saying crypto is not a good thing, but at the same time they're building their holdings. It's a weird kind of hoping to keep it cheap. So because one day they think it will be worth an awful lot more.
Well, you've got to look at history, and you've got to look what happened in the last bull market, last bear market, etc. And some of these cryptos, because there's thousands of the things, some of them, and a lot of them actually just go to zero eventually. But as you know, I have a lot of cryptocurrency. Now, I think it's about 20% of my assets, my portfolio now is in crypto. That wasn't intentional. I only started buying it in November. Actually, my wife's owned crypto for 5 years. So she has done phenomenal. Wow. I mean, I won't even tell you the numbers are ridiculous. But I only got into it in November. Now, before that, I thought, oh, it's a scam and whatever, because all these top guys who I know said it was a scam and everything. But actually, I did a huge research piece. I mean, I'm talking hundreds of hours into not just cryptocurrency, but macro in general. And the reason I changed my mind on it, what I realized was when I was tracking all the QE and liquidity, and I ask anyone that's listening, go and do this for yourself. You look at the amount of new currency that's being created, and you just overlay that with the stock market, the housing market, loads of different equities. And what you'll notice is really, it's not a mystery while all these equities are going up. They're all keeping time with the dollar. Now, what isn't keeping time with the dollar? Cryptocurrency. It is doing its own thing. So I went in, I bought Bitcoin at 18,000, and I bought a lot of crypto at the time. Well, no, a small basket. I think I bought 7 or 8. There wasn't a lot at the time. Bought them very cheap. And then I did very, very well from them. And then with my private community, I started to do experiments and things. And we did a 20 coin challenge, which is what everyone still talks about. And we did 250% gain in a few months. I mean, it was crazy how fast. And then, I then adopted my normal mindset approach investor. Okay, guys, let's sell down a lot of this now. Let's go back into normal investment approaches. And, we sold down, and then we look for. So one of the things I always do is I'm looking for undervalued assets. You see, most people don't do this, which I don't get at all. If you're an investor, you don't want to buy things at value. No, you want to look for undervalued assets. Yeah. You buy property when there's a housing crash. You buy stocks when there's a stock market crash. You buy cryptocurrency when there's a cryptocurrency market crash. A lot of people, when it's an all-time high, that was a 2.7 trillion market cap back in April, I think it was. People were just going all in. And I'm saying, I would probably wait for a pullback, but, up to you. So what I was doing, I was looking for cryptos that I knew were fantastic project, good leadership team. And I was looking at their discount from the ATH, which is the all-time high.
Yes.
And for me, I bought things like DOT, KSM, so Polkadot, Kusama. I was buying things like Cardano, ADA. I was buying all these assets, and now some of them are up 150% just in 6 weeks or so. Although we've seen a slight pullback over the last week, but that's normal. So I do believe in crypto. I think it's completely detached. And you've got to think as well, what's crypto? A 2 trillion market cap compared to equities, which, I don't know, 75, 80 trillion or more.
Yeah. And
let me ask you this, Chris, when does inferior technology ever overtake superior technology?
Yeah, and that's what's really interesting, isn't it? Because it's all based on superior technology, crypto.
Correct.
Yeah, it's so that opportunity, providing it's not quashed by government, and because they haven't got control of it, have they?
No,
and it's a feeling that it undermines things like the dollar. Potentially, it's not so easy to control.
Yeah, well, that's just it. But look what El Salvador just launched: Bitcoin as legal tender next to the dollar. They did not like that. These big, 3-letter organizations did not like that at all. Everyone came out against it. BIS, Bank of International Settlers, IMF, International Monetary Fund. I mean, you name it. If they had a 3 letters organization, they came out. You probably have Dog Trainers International came out and against it. Everyone, a lot of it as well. I laugh about it, because when people panic and they're crying about their crypto and everything like that, I guess I don't get it. When it crashes and, they've lost 50% and stuff.
But they only lose it when they sell it, though, don't they? Surely. And if you take a longer term horizon, so I have a portfolio of about 30 cryptos, and not enormous values. It's not a huge amount. Although I've only been doing this since early June. I've got one that's about Solana. That's about 600%.
Oh gosh, you chose an amazing one there.
But unfortunately, I didn't put a lot in it. So, but it's nice.
Well, I tell you, Chris, I miss Solana as well. So there you go.
Oh, I think I've got about $100 in it, something like that. But it's still $6. But what I do is I'd see it as being a 10-year project. So it doesn't matter whether it goes up or down. Well, it doesn't really matter. Over the long term, I think it's a good thing. And only putting a modest amount of money in initially, that if I lost it, I wouldn't need to, wouldn't lose my sleep.
Yeah, exactly. And I say that to people as well. Sometimes people join my community or something and they say, oh, you said this was a great project. I bought it and it dropped by 20%. And I say, and they say, oh, I lost money because of you or something. I get this maybe once every few weeks. Someone will make a comment like that. And then I say to them, no, you didn't lose money. You haven't lost money. That isn't what's happened at all. It's just gone down. You've just seen a sort of retraction. It's going to go back up. This is normal investing. I mean, it's usually amateur people who get really upset and start crying and blaming other people when something goes down a little bit. It's like commodities and mining stocks. I said to everyone, and again, I don't put this on YouTube. I put it in the private stuff because It's sort of more investment guidance. So I don't want to just put it out there publicly, but I was talking about mining stocks, commodities, and all these things. And I said, these are going to explode, but they're probably going to retrace a little bit before they explode. So why? Because this is probably the next question you're going to ask me. Why will they explode? Well, I look at what the government's talking about. What are they saying they want to see investment in? And when I see that, okay, green energy, we're going to be 100% green by the year, blah, blah, blah. No, they're not. There isn't enough. It's easy to just say we're going to do something, but you've also got to think about practical things as well.
Yes.
Is there enough lithium? Is there enough of these rare earth metals? And if there isn't, and the mines aren't there, you can't just click your fingers and invent a mine. You've got to, do all the work, send a geologist, you've got to build the mine, you've got to get the staff, these things take time, the refinery and supply chains, etc. So I look at all of this and I say, okay, they want green energy. So I'm going to do some investments into green energy. But at the same time, I'm going to bet against it. I'm going to bet on uranium. And what has exploded in the last week? Uranium.
Yeah.
I'm going to bet on that. Why? Because they're not going to hit their targets. And then they're going to need fossil fuel-based stuff as well to meet that. And also, how do you think these things get built? What do you think? How do you build a solar panel? You don't build it out of water and, leaves. No. You need raw materials to build this stuff. So, it's fascinating, really.
Yeah. So, where would you? So basically, what you do is you look at areas where you think there's going to be growth moving forward, and you look for things that are undervalued. Yeah, and you invest money there. Is it better to invest money in tangible things like gold and silver and property, or is it as good to invest in less tangible things like cryptocurrency and shares?
Great question. So I always say to people, you need to have a mixture of both, tangible and intangible. Now, if we go into a period which I think we're going into, and we're already in it, actually, we're already deep into it, you're going to wish that you own some gold and silver. At the same time, you're going to wish you own some cryptocurrency. So you've got to look at everything. Let's say in the very unlikely event that was a full deleveraging and everything just collapsed by 80% like it did in the Great Depression. Don't forget, the Great Depression, stock market and housing market crashed 80 to 90%. People don't remember these things because generations forget the generation before them. Yes. So that's what happened. It just crashed very, very badly because it was a great deleveraging that happened. And again, that was a mistake by the Federal Reserve. Again, it was a liquidity crisis and they didn't put enough liquidity in and everything just goes whoosh, like that. You got to think of it as a downward spiral. Yeah. When one starts to say, okay, we're running out of liquidity, it calls on the next one. The next one calls on the next one. And you just have this massive collapse happen really fast. So I think that people should have a home, but if you are looking to buy it now, it might not be the right time. Because if you already own a home, I definitely see people all the time say to me, Neil, I'm going to sell my home now while it's at a high, and then I'm going to buy it back when it crashes. And I say, I don't know. I don't know if that's a good idea. I mean, you're probably not going to be able to get a mortgage then. If everything crashes, you might not have a job. You might not have mortgage providers actually offering mortgages. There's all these things you got to bear in mind. But gold and silver, definitely recommend that. I also recommend having a more extreme outlook as well. So think worst case scenario. What happens if all these supply chain breakdowns continue? And just the other night, I was in the supermarket. There was no poultry. There was no fresh fruit and vegetables. Yes. Yeah. And that was only 6:00. Yes. They said, oh yeah, tomorrow there'll be another, stock coming in, etc. If this continues and the supply shortages in food and all these other things, people are going to be in big trouble because the average person now, and it's funny when people got to hurry you up because we've only got a minute and a half left. Oh no! I've got to finish next week, so got 15 seconds. Oh no, that's it. I'll finish there, Chris. We could talk all day on this stuff.
We can. Can I put you on the spot now? Can we have a part two?
Yeah, sure. Part two, sure.
This has been absolutely brilliant. I've loved talking to you. You're a very inspiring guy, and you're just full of wisdom. And I've certainly learned some things today and got my mind thinking. So, do you have one final message you'd like to leave us with?
Just be prepared. Don't just believe everything that you hear on the media and even sometimes what the government say. They're not always right. Prepare yourselves. Watch my videos.
Where do people go for those? Is that's can you get those?
Yeah, so I've got a YouTube channel, Neil McCoy-Ward. I talk about finance and investing, or my Patreon. So that's Patreon.com/Neil McCoy-Ward. The Patreon is where I give all the investment stuff. I help people with investing and finance. So there's the two options.
Fantastic. Neil, it's been absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us today. And if you've got any questions or comments, do send them to me. Do get in touch with Neil. Do check out patreon.com/Neil McCoy-Ward. Been brilliant. Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Awesome show, guys. All clear.
Thank you.
All right. Good.